Roll call, please.
Anderson.
Here.
Andriola.
Present.
Freckus. Dare.
Here.
Dewar.
Here.
Hill. Here. Reese is late. Zimmerman.
Here.
Sevilla.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. And for the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd like to call on Tom. He does.
Recording in progress.
Which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll open item 3, public comment. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment?
No.
Public comment on in the room or by Zoom?
Nobody on Zoom.
Do you have to read the disclosure that we've all been reading on how to access and to read the Zoom link or the phone number? We have to do that.
I put it on the agenda, it's on the website, so it's very visible,
All right.
and noted.
Yeah.
It's not necessary.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to both of you. So we'll close out item 3 and move on to item 4, possible board comments or acknowledgements. Is there anyone on the board like to make a comment or statement?
Have a great day, everybody. Let's have fun.
Okay.
Thanks for watching.
Yeah, the lunch was awesome, I have to say. And I'm looking forward to this session. It's always welcome to talk about our water planning and where we're going in the future, so excited about today. Next item, we're gonna go to item 5, which is approval of the agenda. I'm looking for a motion. So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Andriola and second from Commissioner Hill. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. We're moving on to 6, approval of the minutes of June 20, 2024 for the Tumwa Board of Directors meeting. And again, I'm looking for a motion.
Madam Chair, move to approve.
Great. All right, we have, it was Commissioner Andriola and who was the second there? Commissioner Dare. All right, and are there any comments on the minutes or changes requested in any way? All right, seeing none, all in favor of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. And now we're gonna move into the meat of our agenda, item 7, and I think we're gonna be led in song by Kara Steeland and Don Emma. And so one of you would like to kick us off, and you're gonna give us an update, as I understand it, on the past, the current water plan. Is that correct?
That's correct, and Madam Chair, I'll start off with just a few introductory comments for some of the board members who weren't here 5 years ago when we kicked off the water resource plan. So every 5 years, we start our water resource plan and we update it. It's based on a 20-year projection. The 20 years is just somewhat industry standard, some do it more, but beyond 20 years, your predictions start to get a little less and less accurate. Doesn't mean we're not looking past 20 years with blinders on. Our climate study goes out to the end of the century. And so the reason we're here today is to review the existing water resource plan and some of the progress that's been made since then. So that'll be the agenda item 7, and then we move into agenda item 8. That'll be looking at getting board input, questions, requests for analysis in the new updated water resource plan. Don't feel pressured to get all your questions or input today. We'll have time after it. This just starts to kick off the process of actually drafting the plan. But then with that draft plan, that plan will go out to the public for public review, and we'll come back to the board for input and comment before we go to the next step of drafting the final plan. The other thing is Nate, as Director of Natural Resource, he'll kind of lead this discussion, and then Mr. Enloe, Mr. Polieri, and Ms. Stevens, and Mr. Howe will chime in. So they're all up there. I'm going to take it away.
Great. Thanks, John. So as John mentioned, the first section is to kind of review some of the recommendations that were a part of the previous water resources plan we've been working on over the last 5 years. Our plan is to walk you through each one of those bullets. We've then highlighted which one of those recommendations that we'll be revisiting for additional discussion in the second half here. All that said, we're doing this as a workshop to make this conversational. So anytime you have questions or comments or need clarification, don't be shy. We'll do our best to help keep us on track time-wise as well. So if that Cara, you wanna advance us through, here you go.
Well, we're kind of figuring that out. Two more items of housekeeping. So we have two general board agenda items. We were able to cancel Wednesday's normal board meeting and free up some time, so we put those at the very end of this meeting. We'll probably want to conclude this meeting around 3:30, so if we can get to those agenda items by about 3:15. I don't want to stop the conversation, we have plenty of time. That's kind of the ballpark idea. Shoot for it.
All right, I think we're business now. So we're gonna start, like Nate mentioned, going through each of the recommended actions from the previous plan. You have the recommended actions chapter available to you in your packets, and also the PowerPoint presentation as well. Some of these recommended actions are pretty straightforward and won't require many updates. And again, like Nate mentioned, these are the recommended actions in the current plan, and these will come before you in some sort of revised version in the 2025 to 2045 plan. So we're just telling you about progress that has happened thus far. So recommendation 1.1 is a standard recommendation that Tumwell basically updates its water resource plan every 5 years in response to current and future conditions. So that's why we're here again at a workshop in front of you, starting this update process. Recommendation 1.2 discusses Tumwell's geographic scope of the planning area, and 1.3 covers small water system acquisitions, which we discussed actually at our last workshop prior to the completion of the 2020 to 2040 plan. Both of these topics are indicated in green because they'll be discussed in more detail later in the workshop. Now for recommendation 2.1 and 2.2, Bill Houck will provide an update on these two.
So 2.1, conjunctive use of water resources. As everyone knows, conjunctive use is kind of the coordinated management of our ground and surface water resources, kind of to optimize both of them to provide the most cost-effective source of supply to our customers. So within this, it was recommended we continue to rely on Tumwell's pool of resources to meet current demand, continue acquiring additional rights, water rights to meet future demand, understand that TRO is there for drought years for us, continue to monitor Tumwell's ability to meet current and future demand by using the 87 to 94 drought as our standard for planning. That is still the drought record. Planning, long-term forecasting, look at increasing demand over time, improvements in technology as far as conservation goes, and then maximize storage opportunities under TRO during droughts. And so that's really recommendation 2.1. 2.2 was groundwater management, and under that recommendation, we were directed to continue using groundwater as needed to meet customer demand, while maintaining or even improving aquifer groundwater levels through active and passive recharge, kind of strategically recharging wherever we needed to based on what was going on with the groundwater. So.
Claire, did you have a question? It's okay, you don't need to be shy, that's why we're doing this as a workshop. Okay.
She does have
That's true, you're right.
Okay, I'm gonna ask her a question.
Yeah, please.
I can ask the
But
question,
good. Please.
but thank you. I just thought she might know it, I didn't know if
Sure.
everyone else knew, because I don't know how long I can say I'm new, but I'm still new. So, I was just wondering if there's any plan to update the 1987-1994 drought period plan that you referred to, where you put Tumwell's ability to meet current and future demand by modeling the 1987-1994 drought period. And if the factors included in that, you had meant, because that's the modeling that we currently have, so I was wondering if there was gonna be a plan for update modeling.
Sure. Yeah, that still is the drought of record
Okay.
as far as intensity and especially duration. Lake Tahoe was under the rim for about 2 years. It was very severe. In fact, a lot of changes came about from that drought. So that still is the drought that we use for planning purposes. I would say 2015, as far as intensity goes, was more intense. But as far as drought over a period of years, that was a 7-year drought. That was still the one we planned for.
And Bill, can you talk a little bit about, the updated modeling, and because the 87 and the 94 was really the worst drought we could look at, the one that
Sure.
Troll was geared to look at, but we're updating the hydrologic modeling.
Okay.
Yeah, so in the past, last resource plan, we looked 80 years out to the future to 2098, right to the end of the century. We incorporated climate modeling as part of that. We looked at extreme version and kind of a more moderate scenario. That took us out to the end of the century. What we're doing this time around, since there's really been no new modeling to speak of as far as climate change that's kind of downscaled to our area. We're actually gonna be taking a look back. We got a hold of some tree ring data going back 500 years. And we're working with UNR and our consultant to turn that into a hydrology that's gonna be run through our riverware and operations models. And it's gonna give us a real good idea of what the past looked like, past hydrology in the Truckee River system, all the way back to the early 1500s looked like.
Wow.
And, hopefully we'll be able to maybe clean something off that and talk to that about how severe it was and maybe even use that for a future plan.
So just, when are you gonna do that?
That's going on right now,
Oh,
actually.
right
It's
now.
ready to, they're almost ready to begin doing the runs. So, yeah, that paleo tree data has been converted to hydrology, Truckee River hydrology. And we're just looking at, what kind of inputs and variables are gonna feed into the model, so.
And we have some more discussion on the agenda coming up. So there'll be some more on both of those modeling efforts that Bill just mentioned.
Sorry, that's okay. That's perfect. Okay, we'll discuss recommendation 2.3.
Great, so as many of you know, aquifer storage and recharge is a very important priority for Tumwa and has been for a long time. I think as this priority reads now, there will not be any other significant changes in how we set this as a priority for the next 20 years. I will say we're in the middle of updating our models about how much groundwater we need where. And there's still some more work to do on that, and we'll come back to you all with more details as we get ready to update that number for the next plan. But basically, these past goals that we've had in the last couple of resource plans, the last 5 years, it was 9,000 acre feet, have been effective in quite a few areas. So for this next plan, we do see the system-wide goal number for the next 5 years probably coming down. There will be some specific areas where we're gonna continue, and I'm sure we've talked with a number of you about what some of those areas are, but there will be some areas in the system that will continue to invest in doing more recharge, but system-wide, we expect that total number can start coming down for the next 5 years.
Then water rights, recommendation 2.4 will be discussed in quite a lot of detail by Eddie in a little bit later in the workshop in agenda item 8. Thank you.
So
I'm sorry, Bill's discussing this recommendation.
yeah, so recommendation 2.5, water conservation. We were directed to continue to implement, advise as needed, Tumwa's draft contingency plan, promote smart and efficient use of community water resources and compliance with federal and state regulations. This time around, our conservation plan and our draft contingency plan are actually going to be weaved into the water resource plan, but we're going to have an appendix in the back with a lot of measurables and results of how our conservation program over time has saved water. There'll be some metrics back there, so those will be detailed in an appendix this time. But this plan will be weaved into the water resource plan, so we just have one plan, which is the resource plan and the conservation plan, and that's been approved by the state of Nevada.
So this would be the first time you've gone backwards to show that data?
I would say we really haven't had any measurable results saying like this particular program has saved this much water since it's been implemented. Those are the kind of things we're really going to be adding, layering into the plan stuff.
I think that's a great idea because a lot of people want to know if it's making an impact. Be able to prove it. Thank you.
Great, so recommendation 2.6, source water contamination. We've done quite a lot of work that you all have heard about and over the past few years with source water protection. After the integrated source water protection plan was implemented, we also have developed a lot of other upstream partnerships since the last water resource plan, including our Middle Truckee River Watershed Forest Partnership, development reviews with City of Reno and now Washoe County as part of our source water protection plan, and our Forest Ambassador program to protect White's Creek watersheds, and many more. So this recommendation will be updated in the new plan to reflect a lot of those partnerships and programs. And then 2.7 is our emergency water supply standard. This is a really standard recommendation that's been included in the plan since Tomoa's first water resource plan way back in the early 2000s, and we still feel that this is an adequate and achievable goal for our emergency water supply standard.
So what is the goal?
So
It says 7 days.
Yeah, it's the 7 days with river outages, and we do have Danny Rotter here to discuss this in more detail if anyone has specific questions.
So worst case scenario, we think 7 days during the summer, so it's that peak summer demand that we can deliver with groundwater capacity.
Is that like a national standard or are we just implementing that ourselves?
I give some history.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you wanna do this? If you wanna do it, take it, go.
Yeah. So you got kind of 3 days, 3 demands to think of. You got wintertime demand, you got peak summer demand, and you have that, the yearly average. And so this goal has always been to meet that indoor water use, which is really a wintertime demand, but doing it in the summer. And so on the facility plan side that pairs with this, one of the things that we've talked about is how realistic, if you have a river outage, is it for everybody to entirely curb their irrigation in the summer to get this demand. So we've actually been a little more conservative on the facility plan side, and that's been some of our discussions about how many wells and how often can you turn them on? And should we plan for 100% well availability, knowing what we know going through the 2015 drought, and trying to run all that groundwater and having pumps fail. You see that this out in Churchill County right now, they're in a bad way because they lost a well. So those are kind of the redundancy things that we talk about, but that's generally not planned to change. So same goal, keep the same level of service. So I think that's
Just some history to this. I'm gonna show my age, but this actually came out 30 years ago when I was at Sierra Pacific Power Company, when Chalk Bluff was just being constructed and everything. And the goal was roughly, like Danny said, be able to meet water demands in the summer if the river was out at the time. Remember the train derailment in the Sacramento River? We actually did a study with UNR on the probability of something like that happening back in Sierra Pacific days, but it was basically try to provide a week's worth of roughly average day demand, 60 to 65 million gallons a day, because we figured people would cheat in the middle of summer and try to keep their landscaping alive and everything, but buy you a week to try to implement some emergency treatment operations if you needed to at Chalk Bluff or something to treat a contaminant in the river, that type of thing. So that's really where it evolved from. And it actually, back then anyway, we were looking at Hunter Creek and Highland Reservoir, those are the two big covered storage reservoirs. That was integral into the sizing of those reservoirs back then because we wanted to provide enough capacity off of those reservoirs to be able to meet this demand. So that's a 30-year-old history.
So beyond resource, which I think that's good, do we work, because on the health department, different things, we talk a lot about implementing emergency things, is that they're the ones that would run a true emergency, or do we work with them? I just never seen anything come before me that says, hey, we had a water outage, we're doing practice, this is what we're gonna do, this is how our city and region respond. I just never seen anything. Do we do that? Is that something we're region at large? Who are you guys, who are we working with to implement if we actually hit an emergency where the river, I never thought about it until you said it. The river turns off for some reason.
Ian is in here or not, but there's a whole emergency planning group throughout Washoe County, which involve the cities and the fire department and everything like that. But I think Will would probably be the best one to speak to coordination with the health department during an actual emergency like that. So,
Will, do you wanna?
Hi, Will Raymond. Just to give you a brief update on how we handle these. We have very long-standing established relationships with Northern Nevada Public Health and with NDEP on how we handle situations like that. Prime example, last week during the fire out in Verdi, we have those communication portals established where you have the health department calling operations. We have had incidents where you get something into Lake Tahoe where our counterparts and our natural resources, we foster that communication line. So if something's happening up in our primary water reservoir, for example, they're calling us to let us know. And we're assessing. Typically, it's a group email out to all our partner agencies at Washoe County, Sparks, and Reno saying, we are aware of this. This is not an impact to Tomo operations as it currently stands. But to Danny's point earlier, it's all a matter of timing. And I don't have any wood to knock on easily, but what it really comes down to is we have these procedures established and we work very closely with the regulators. So whether that's a water outage or a long-term issue, it's really about awareness. And I think that's one of these longevity things that we have to build. We have those connections to say, we're good, or we need to call them out.
Thank you. I know I see things that do happen on the large. I just never heard them mention the water side of it. So thank you.
Fingers crossed.
So do we have enough with wells to cover the 7 days? Is that what you all are saying?
Yeah.
And then on the 8th day, are we done? I mean, what?
We rested.
Look, based on what we, like as John just explained, that number is a combination of forecasting what we think river outage might look like, what our capabilities are to operate with the existing infrastructure, and how much time we think we would need in order to come up with alternatives if it turns out it will be longer than 7 days. So, it's a kind of a complicated calculus, but that's the best number that we have to date, and is something we had planned on just renewing in the next resource plan.
But I guess what I'm saying, are the wells recharging? I mean, they're not just that done.
So our average annual daily demand is about 77 MGD, somewhere in that region. And we have the capacity right now to pump that daily from our wells that are in the system. So just our wells alone, standalone, we could meet that demand for 7 days. And add on system storage, Hunter Creek and Highland reservoirs and water.
I mean, could we make it
We could
2
get longer.
weeks?
We could go longer than 10 days probably.
the other thing.
Because I figure by the time you figure that, oh my gosh, this train derailment, whatever the thing is, this acid that went into the river, whatever it was, it's still a problem. And we're gonna have to, backstop with some alternate water supplies. Even our, purified water system, which we're saying could be an alternate water system, right?
And Fish Springs is another one that wasn't around when the standard was implemented, and that has a lot of capacity.
That has the 4,000 or 2,000 or?
As far as, it's probably on the order of 10 to 12 million gallons a day by itself that we could bring back into the system ultimately. even just a Whites Creek Mountain Rose Water Treatment Plant, there's 2, 3, 4 MGD that you could operate that wasn't around back then either, and all of the county's wells too that factor into it. So we've got a lot of production capacity that really wasn't around when this standard was originally developed.
So I guess I'm wondering, is this a standard you would update in the next plan?
I think we wanna revisit it because having a firm number, I don't really think is appropriate. I mean, that kind of tied our hands when we were at Sierra Pacific, but kind of a general guideline, like Danny and everybody's been saying, buying us time to try to implement other measures in case outage is going to be longer. I mean, the one thing that the study that was done 30 years ago said is most of the contaminants that were hauled on the rail line would pass through.
I figured, yeah.
And so might not be so great for Pyramid Lake or something like that, but as far as our ability to divert and treat water, the probability of something that was gonna stick around was extremely low.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's what the 7-day standard was based on, looking
How
at
fast it would go by.
that.
I would just say, I worked in South Florida, and when 9/11 came, we had 2,000 miles of canal, river, stream, that they were very worried. I happened to be running the EOC that day. I was the number 2, and the boss was away, and here's 9/11. I have everybody on complete, this is for entire Miami-Dade, Fort Lauderdale, Broward, all of them, West Palm Beach, all of these major cities get their water from this whole canal system. And they were very worried that planes were gonna land on this water system, right? And it was a lot of scrambling, but it just made me think that there are longer term emergencies that might not be a chemical spill, but something else. And no planes landed in the 2,000 mile water system in South Florida that day or the next day. So we were good, but everybody's on high alert for sure.
Great.
So looking at recommendation 3.1, that's our water demand forecast. Again, kind of one of those standard recommendations we have in the plan. We work in coordination with Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency and the Western Regional Water Commission to ensure our population and water demand projections are in line with other projections for the region. And Sean Stoddard will use his standard methodology to come up with the water demand forecast for the 2045 plan as well.
So on that one, I continue to hear, a lot of people weren't here when that WC3 was passed. A lot of newer residents, or they just didn't even understand what it meant. And I've often had to interpret it and I've told them that these forecasts are done, and my understanding of the current one is it's something like 750,000 people. I mean, I'm not sure, I don't know, does anybody happen to know that? 680,000.
By 2045 or?
For the water demand forecast
Right.
or the
Total
region.
sustainable water supply,
Yeah.
Western Regional Water Commission's number.
For 2045.
So, today.
What the water resources.
Sorry, I understand. I don't know that off the top of my head, but I think we can.
Kim is here.
What was the question? What was the water demand forecast?
No, sorry, what is the total sustainable?
Sustainable.
Population.
Oh, population.
It was a demand.
So the water, I'm sorry.
I can take a little bit of it. I mean, typically it's a demand level that can be served by the county's sustainable water resources, and we just updated that within the last month or so.
Yes.
There was a negative reaction when the Water Planning Commission once put out a population number. And so we have stayed away from that population number ever since then and just talked about the sustainable water resources. Because it was something on the order of $750,000 and there was 750,000 people. And there was a very negative outcry based on that number. When our population was 450, people freaked out because they thought that's what the community was planning towards. And so we stayed away from these population projections and just relied on what are the what water resources do we have to supply a demand level, so it didn't get into that population?
Well, I understand that we want to stay away from that, but if I recall the language of the WC3 at that time, it said that every year the population, that's what I recall, the bill said that we would estimate this population and whether, you know, how much we could provide. But it would be good to check back in on that language, just.
I think we do that to the consensus forecast.
Yeah.
Is what is compared
Right.
against.
Right.
Not some future totally arbitrary population
Right.
that could be served.
Correct. Census forecast, that's what I was looking for.
That forecasting is still in process of being developed, so we'll come back to you when we have those numbers to actually include in this next plan.
Great, and then recommendation 3.2, future climate change impacts. Like Bill Hauck mentioned, we've been keeping informed about updates to current climate change science and reviewing the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's sixth assessment report, which was released in 2023. And as of now, we don't have any new global models like we did last time. We had 8 global climate change models or general circulation models that were downscaled for our region, meaning that the statistics have been done to actually have those have meaningful results for our region. At this time, we don't have any new models. And also the IPCC report doesn't have emission scenarios worse than the RCP 8.5, which if you remember was our very high emission scenario that we used in the last plan. And so, and actually in the newest report, the very high emission scenarios have become less likely. So at this time, without those downscaled models, which are a serious undertaking that we would have to work with, that we just don't have them for the region. UCLA did those last time for all of the Sierra Nevada. So what we're proposing is Bill's looking at his paleohydrology study with UNR and our consultant, and then we propose to stay informed about the climate models, and we'll update the 2030 it'll be the 2050 WRP if there's any new models at that time that will provide us with better information to make educated planning decisions. And then we are also rerunning the climate modeling we did in the last plan to assess the impacts of ASR and other future resources on supplies. So we are looking at the climate change modeling, we're looking at 500 years of hydrology and comparing it to the climate change modeling, but we won't have new global climate models to present during this planning process because they don't exist for the region right now.
But who would be doing those, you said? You said LA, UCLA did it before, but who would be doing it now?
We would need to find a university partner, most likely a climate change scientist that could downscale those for the
Well, is
region.
that something you put in the next plan that you plan to do?
We could put those in, probably, we don't have time to develop those for the 2020.
Right.
Yeah, but we could definitely look into them.
But
for
it doesn't the
2030,
plan
2020.
say what you plan to do, like?
Yeah, so we can certainly recommend that we continue to look at the climate change models and try to downscale them for the region if.
But rather than continue to look at, what I'm asking is, would we actually in the plan make a decision to over that period make one? Instead of just waiting to see if somebody else does it or if it becomes available.
I think we could research it. I am hesitant to say that we would completely do it at this point in time, just if it's a very expensive undertaking and it's not going to provide us with valuable information for planning.
No, of course, we wouldn't do anything that's not gonna give us valuable information, but what I'm saying is, over the next 5 years, isn't that something we wanna work on, find a partner, find multiple partners, Bureau Rec, a university, maybe USGS, whoever, NOAA, to actually do it, so the next plan update, we will actually have it.
Yeah.
So we do something like that.
Yes.
It seems what I think I hear is that as these things become more needed, we have researchers who step up and then we would partner with them easily. During right now, they don't see that as a need, so they have not done that. And so I think if we're gonna make a plan, I think we keep our eyes open to see if other people are gonna be interested if it becomes a need, and it's what we're doing. And if people are looking at our area, we definitely wanna partner with them. Would be a way to put that. But I think I'd be careful to try to say that we want to study. We need to study. I think we keep our eyes open, look for partners. I think that's wise. But I'd be careful to say that we are pushing to make sure there is a study done.
It is a very large undertaking to create the model. And in the last plan, there was, so a giant global model comes out from academics, the IPCC. Then some other large regional group of academics creates the regional model and puts it out. And then organizations like ours can go find somebody to take that and pull out the stuff that's related to water. And so while there's a new global model, nobody regionally has started working on what is the regional interpretation of that. That then when that's done, then we could contract to update our model. Does that make sense?
It does, and then I'm wondering what the scale of regional model is. Do you have a feel for that?
Well, it's like typically all of Western United States, right? So it would be the Intermountain West to the Pacific.
I thought you were saying maybe this year.
Well, UCLA, yeah, so they actually had to downscale it to the Sierra Nevada because the climate is very unique with the mountains. So they did have to, they scaled it to the whole Sierra Nevada, and then there were specific models for the northern Sierra Nevada as well.
But certainly we can update that. It's a priority for us to update as new models come out for us to utilize, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did we invest in the science center up at Lake Tahoe for UNR and UC Davis? Does Tumwa do any investment in that?
Not that I know of.
And everything we're hearing, IPC is backing off that work stream modeling anyway. 8.5, they're backing off and saying it's less and less likely, so we're pretty confident, at least at this time, that we're not gonna get into a situation like that. And the last go around, we didn't have any problems till 50 years out under that scenario.
Great. And now John Enlow will discuss recommendation 3.3 and 3.4.
Right, and this is just mostly related to continuing our coordination with our regional partners with the One Water Nevada effort, including UNR and others. I think that's been very successful, and we'll spend a little bit more time under 3.4 just talking more about indirect potable reuse and some current discussions related to direct potable reuse.
More to come on that. Okay, great. Even though we've had lots of good discussion, now is the time we're just shifting into the real deep dives into a small set of topics that we expect there will be changes on, and feel like it's important to get your input on those as we go through. So the first topic we're gonna dive into is giving you guys a preview of some of the work we're doing on water rights, and Eddie is gonna facilitate the next couple of slides here.
All right, thank you. Eddie Collieri, for the record, Water Rights Manager. So I'm gonna go over kind of a broad overview of our water rights portfolio, which you'll see is pretty robust, and a lot of work over the history of the water system's gone into that. I'll also kind of give a snapshot in the future 20 years, kind of how we look on the projected demands versus the water rights we have available to meet those demands as we speak today. So we'll look at kind of it's a worst case scenario. It's basically looks at if we stop buying water rights or stop acquiring them, how do we look in the future? So I'll go through that. And then I'll talk also about some strategies that we're looking into on keeping up with these, with the demands, and also not just that, but keep building that robust portfolio and the resiliency in our water resources going into the future. So right now, this is kind of our first policy slide here. We wanna, our main objective is to continue to maintain our inventory of water rights for future growth and that resiliency in the future. Our current Rule 7 amount, that's what we can sell to new growth right now. If those customers aren't bringing in water rights for their projects. We have 3,200 acre feet currently in our bank.
just to give you an idea of how much we've sold since 2020, since the last plan, we've sold 1,800. We've also purchased 1,600 since then. So we're always kind of keeping up with those to make it sustainable, to keeping up with those demands. And this was in the last presentation when we did this policy workshop last time, and kind of goes over our strategic water rights purchases should be made for our focus is on surface water rights with early priority dates, relatively large blocks of water rights in single transactions to make those worth it. Also try to purchase rights that talk to our specialty projects like the Mount Rose treatment plant. So this is a slide everyone's seen many times. We've updated it for this PowerPoint. It shows you that the Truckee River decree and the Ore-Ditch decree, the rights are finite, they're capped. We're not gonna get any more water rights from the Truckee River. 226,000
Did you
is
say
the
these
number.
colors, cause it's hard to
Yeah,
read
yeah.
the key?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
which ones are?
So gray at the bottom
The
is the
gray.
Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe. The blue is Tumwas. That's including our banked M&I water rights, all of our surface water portfolio there. The green is Reno, Sparks, Washoe County. The lime green is Reno, Sparks, Washoe County. Then the green is the important one I wanna kind of highlight here is the ag rights. Those are still in Ore-Ditch ag form. And you can see how they're converting to M&I through the graph. And we expect that to continue, but we'll talk about that in a bit. And then you have the creek rights on the different creeks. And you can see on the very top is, we've started a reach of purchasing those creek rights for return flow and things like that. So that's what this looks at. This doesn't include, you hear TCID's portion, this doesn't include TCID's claim 3. But the main thing I put this up here, and you've seen this many times, is that green, and is that gonna continue? That shrinking of the ag rights and converting over to municipal rights. So that's kind of the important thing. So my next slide, it talks more about that. The 40,000, that number showed on the far right was there's still about 40,000 acre feet in decreed form. How much of that's being used, it's a lot less than that we know. So we're embarking on a complicated GIS project to pinpoint where those rights are they being used, what's the likelihood they'd convert over to municipal? If they're gonna be developed, then they're gonna come over and get dedicated to parcels that develop. And maybe it's not a high priority to purchase those rights, but if there are big blocks, like our strategy talked about, maybe if we know where those are, we can make efforts at purchasing those to build our portfolio. A lot of them we're gonna find that are fractionated, meaning they're all dispersed little chunks. They'll have title issues, all the stuff that you've heard of, and that makes water right transfers difficult. So this project, though, it's a long-term project, and hopefully it'll help drive make our purchases more strategic. So this next slide is our Truckee River water rights. It dives more into our surface water here. I'm gonna go over our groundwater next. So we have 123,000 acre feet of Truckee River rights. That includes our creek water rights. It also includes this thing I brought up with banked water rights that are banked with us for future developments from developers. And those numbers are included here. So you have our initial municipal rights of 39,000. There's been about 75,000 that have transferred over, that have been converted from ag to municipal. You have our Rule 7 amount, and if the numbers don't add, that Rule 7 amount's included in the 74,000, which also includes our creek amount. That's our total Rule 7. And then the banked rights, the mainstream banked, that's the Truckee River banked, and then you have these creek banked amounts. So that's our Truckee River amount portfolio. Our groundwater rights. So we have 43,000 acre feet dispersed among 8 different groundwater basins. as you can see here, you're all familiar with that. And this is my 20-year outlook here. So the 107 is what went to the Western Regional for our mid-range of water demands in 2045. Our current demand is 82,000. That leaves a deficit of 24,000 there. So this looks at how would we meet that today if we didn't purchase any more water rights, we just stopped. How does our portfolio fill in that gap? And so you see our Tumwa and banked surface water, that's the 12,000, that comes from the previous slides. And then we have about 10,000 of banked groundwater. That includes places like Fish Springs Ranch, those projects. That adds up to 23,000 acre feet. So we have a deficit, 1,000 acre feet. Again, that's, in my mind, that's not that bad of a deficit to have, and figuring that we are gonna be pursuing more rights. Also, developers are gonna be dedicating rights to projects as well. So that's if we just stop doing everything and we just relied on what we have.
So when you say demand to 2045, what kind of population are you saying?
I believe that's in the, or has that here, right?
The Tumwa population served in that projection was about 567,000 people.
And what do we serve now?
Serve about 470,000.
Thank you.
100,000 increase.
And so again, at the very bottom, our remaining ag rights, those are gonna be a portion of where we're gonna be focusing on, amongst other different portions. So here's our strategic water rights acquisitions. Here's a few ideas that I wanted to highlight of what we're working towards. So, we wanna maintain this for future growth and for the resiliency of our sources. We're working on the new tool for the agricultural rights to see, strategically which ones we should go after. That was the GIS project that we're working on. The next one is develop new tools to purchase commercial excess water rights. Within TROA, it's allowed that, conserved water on the commercial side, we can convert that amount to new growth. So we could purchase that from owners of these dedications and allocate it to new will serves. So that's another project that we want to focus on, building a tool that will show us what is excess on these different commercial parcels in Reno and Sparks. Rule 7 analysis, this is something we do every so often. Our last one was, I believe, in 2020, where we reanalyze how the formula is keeping up with demands. So we're doing another look at that. We need a couple more, 6 more months of data to do a real in-depth study on how that formula is keeping up with the new building codes and uses of water. Are we allocating too much to a parcel if it has xeriscape and has nothing, not a lot of water use? We don't want to be over dedicated to parcels. So that's what that project's looking at. And then I repeat the same strategic water rights purchases blurb from the first slide, kind of how we currently go after water rights and have been pretty successful lately on it, of buying these large blocks of trucking water rights that people are willing to sell. And with that, I'll hand it off to Nate.
Before we move on to the next topic, questions, comments on water rights?
Well, how many of those are real? Of the ag rights? Because aren't we over allocated? Region?
No.
Okay.
Not on the Truckee.
Not on the Truckee River.
Okay. I just mean like the 40,000 acre feet of ag rights.
It's not the same as the groundwater conversation on the basis, where it's wet water.
Okay.
I think Bill can talk more to this. He looked at us compared to like the Colorado River and
It will be interesting if they were all exercised at the same time in the middle of the summer.
So
I think it'd be very interesting.
It's based on your priority of that right. That's why we want to go after the oldest rights so that they are on priority longer through that summer months in a drought situation. That's going towards that building the resiliency. Not just purchasing it for new growth, but also for.
Well, conservation, because it's not the most, they don't conserve it the same way that weaker, so.
Right.
Smart.
Right.
I just want to make a comment, a couple of comments if I could. I just wanted to recognize Eddie and the water rights group because Eddie is really the first person we've had solely dedicated to the water rights area at Tumwa. The other people on that, they've had other responsibilities, but Eddie's done a great job in advancing kind of our water rights acquisition efforts and justice analysis and so forth. So I just want you to recognize the great work that he's doing. I think it's hugely valuable. The other piece of this is Tumwa and the tribe through the negotiations and everything with the return flow management agreement and everything. I think we've had a lot more productive discussions and open discussions with them in the last year or so, and we're really trying to figure out ways where we could work together better with the tribe, and I think they're open to those discussions because, I mean, if we truly cooperated to the best of our abilities with them, I think there's just a lot more that this region could do that would not only benefit this community, but benefit the tribe as well.
Thanks for your hard work. How do you use it?
Yes, okay, yeah.
Sorry.
That's right, it is complicated
It's very complicated.
and sensitive, right?
That's right.
So, yeah. Good, so moving on to another complicated, maybe sensitive topic, is economic development and water. Sonia, do you mind just going to the next one for me so I don't have to mess with the buttons? Great, thank you. You got me, Eddie? Thanks, buddy. So one of the other areas we think we will be including in this next resource plan that hasn't been included before is a discussion on how we coordinate water resources and what our resource planning is for the region here with what the economic development planning and efforts are in the region, and particularly statewide, largely driven by shortages on the Colorado River and how they've impacted southern Nevada. The Governor's Office of Economic Development has been trying to respond to concerns about incentivizing economic development that somehow then happens at the expense of sustainable water resources. And so there's now a statewide effort led by GOED, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, to try and include water as a factor for calculating the award of state incentives. And in my attempt to try and explain how this conversation is going, you'll see this table up here, or graph. Currently, economic incentives are just that horizontal line, right? The more money that a company brings to the state through number of jobs, value of their salary, how much infrastructure they're investing in, et cetera, that's how the state currently incentivizes or calculates what incentive the company may get. The idea is by bringing water into this, you add that vertical scale, right, of large water use or large water impact, which is an important dynamic for us. We are here less concerned about water supply than Southern Nevada that's exclusively concerned about the volume of water. Here, the quality of water is also important. But so think of that y-axis as impacts on water, and you can see if it's low economic value, low water impact, it's neutral, right? Like they're not gonna get many incentives. There's not gonna be a water concern. If they're low economic value, high water impact, consumptive or contamination wise, how do we discourage that? Is there even a formal process for doing that? That's kind of a gray area to date. Similarly, then how do you set priorities for economic development to go out and target industries that really would be beneficial, right? They're high economic value, low water use, or low water impact. And I'll give some examples of a couple of these on the next one. But then you get into this area where it's high economic value, high water use. Then it's a real trick. And so the question then is, how can you incentivize them changing their practices? So we can have them come here, but also still fit in with what our best practices are in managing water regionally. This has been an important conversation for us to be a part of, because it's so different between us, Southern Nevada, Elko, rural Nevada. Everybody has their own water situation and economic priorities. So participating in this process with the state has been really important. Why don't you go to the next one? And we'll be doing some more, just to give you some examples. Things that are already in place. Frankly, we currently have a rule where any new customer that comes in that's looking for 100 acre feet or more has to get board approval. That, by and large, when EDON has contacted us, hey, what's involved? We have a really large water user that may come here regionally. They've sent out a letter of interest. Just letting them know, hey, you've got to go in front of the board to get approval if you're over this range, has acted as it discourages them from proceeding, right? We could look at other structures as well if that's something we think we need. To date, I don't know that we've ever exercised that.
Real quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
So, I have the honor of being on EDON, so I get to see a lot of these things, and then data centers are it. So that's, I mean, it's the wave, it's the surf, it's what's coming, but they use water like that. I mean, their water is the key. So what you're telling me is the opposite of what's being talked about. And so, I mean, I said, I get what we're saying, that you can't do anything without water, but there's not a discouragement happening from data centers coming. So, as much as I appreciate what you're saying, and we've not even seen anything ever come to our board, is that starting in the future from now? Or are they not using that as much water as it seems?
Well, I think here regionally, so in Southern Nevada, certainly there has been discouragement. And that's why GOED is trying to have this statewide conversation about GOED as a state agency and approving state incentives. How do they know what's okay in Southern Nevada versus here? Here, in large part, they've been able to move forward because of things like the effluent pipeline to Trigon, right? So I think here we have an opportunity to say data centers that can use effluent or data centers that have free air cooling could be encouraged to come, especially data centers that use effluent, because that's a benefit to our region, right? To find additional industries. And that's what I have effluent use from both TRIC, which is happening now with the pipeline, but there's also surplus, if you want to call it that, in the South Truckee Meadows, right? And so there's opportunity that by us coordinating better with the regional development authorities saying, hey, if you can find somebody to use effluent, that'd be a great target to recruit to the region, that's an opportunity for us. Additionally, one of the things that a number of corporations are doing is kind of related to ESG goals. One of those is a number of corporations have started setting replenishment goals. So Google, as an example, has set a goal to contribute more water to the environment than they extract from the environment globally. For us here, that creates an opportunity to coordinate with those kind of industries that are coming here. And if we wanted to prioritize industries or companies within those industries that have set replenishment goals, I think that's a worthwhile effort to target. And then incentivizing change, we talked about evaporative cooling as well as industrial processes. If there's ways that we can find technologies, great example is even with a couple of the data centers that are already here in the state who can use effluent, the way they want to use effluent doesn't meet state code, aside from what resources are available. So if there was a mechanism where a community, a regional development authority could say, this is valuable enough that we'll build into the incentive, an offset for this company to change how they operate, or to find a solution that allows them to be permitted to use that because it's good for our region. It's worth identifying those additional opportunities as part of the incentive award framework. So I'll leave it there. Happy to take more questions or conversation. It's still early
I was gonna
in the
say, at this point in
process.
time, we're not having any of these conversations. Okay.
Well, there's a lot of informal discussion that's happening regionally, and I think that's happened for some years where there'd be a casual call between the Regional Development Authority and the water agency, and you go back and forth and decide, do we want a toilet paper manufacturer to move here? I don't know, it uses a lot of water and it discharges high TDS, and there's kind of, well, we just won't, competitively pursue bringing that company here, right? Has happened informally. Where this started becoming more formal, I think it was GoEd started understanding that there was a lot of informal process going on region to region. So in 2019, they first identified this as a challenge. In the last legislative session, the legislature took a first step in directing GoEd that they must include water in their state economic development plans. So now that's why they're opening this statewide conversation about how do we implement this now statewide and taking input from those of us from region to region.
So you said the legislature, is that what you said?
Yeah, that's
Was
right.
there an actual bill on this or something?
It was AB 261. Yeah, in the last session, so 22.
I was gonna say,
Go ahead, John.
so EDON sends out to, NV Energy, Tumwa, wastewater providers, emails, maybe once or twice every quarter, just kind of ebb and flow. And they say, usually here's a company, and sometimes it's confidential on what the company does, but here's their water needs, their wastewater, their power. And so we just reply with the facts of, okay, it's going to cost this much, here's an estimate of what we have. If they're over 100 acre feet, we say that also has to go to the board for approval. And then usually we don't hear from them again, because I think it's a combination of the NV Energy power constraints, it's land constraints, it's all of it. And then they also talk with Tri-Gid about could they take reclaimed water. So that's kind of the conversations we're having regionally with all the other entities.
I think statewide, it makes it's so refreshing to hear the communication is open, because even though there are a lot of complicated factors depending on what those needs are of that company, but the fact that Southern Nevada and Northern Nevada, contrary to popular belief, are very different when it comes to water. And the fact that I've been told that when you guys come for presentations at the legislature, you guys are rock stars. No, really. And so it really helps the legislative body on the Southern Nevada side see that differentiation. But economically, having that conduit, being able to even, maybe it's a pipe dream, that if there isn't something that maybe Northern Nevada may be able to not handle for some reason, that could be Southern Nevada, GoEd could be that conduit possibly. Not from a detailed technical standpoint, but at a high level to not be exclusionary, and to allow businesses to look at Nevada as the state to go to, because of the differentiation between how things are handled, and not just water, but the type of water. So I think that's really encouraging. So I'm glad that it's the beginning of informal, but how great if it can actually be formulated in a more planned process way. So thanks for sharing that.
Good.
It's encouraging.
I just wanted to share a couple of nuances for you, just so you understand, because you probably hear more of these things than we do. So
A little bit, John.
2015, there was when the drought was at its peak, we had a bottled water company wanting to locate up instead and take like 4,000 or 5,000 acre feet of water and send the water back, the bottled water back to California, because they were being shut down in California. And we were sitting there going, we don't have policy in place. If somebody wrote a big enough check, how do we say no? And we call Jeremy Smith and it's like, how do we say no to something like this? And it's really the project of regional significance threshold is kind of the only mechanism that's in there today to let you folks weigh the pros and cons of something like that. But I mean, I think this discussion is great and it's really timely based on what Eddie was talking about. So there is a limit on the amount of water rights, the agricultural water rights that we can convert, right? Today, it's not a significant constraint, but as time goes on, it will become more and more of a constraint. So personally, I think having a policy in place to what Nate's talking about, I think would be really important for this community. And Christopher, what you were saying on, I mean, the data centers, there's nuances there too. So trick, right? Oh, let's put data centers out there a trick because they use effluent. That isn't free water, magic water, right? Because we have to make sure that the downstream users are kept whole if Tumwater is sending effluent to Tri-City. So it's all related, the water and the wastewater side, and the other piece that Nate touched on, the quality piece is hugely important too. Because, okay, we may have, it popped up in our discussion with GoEd, whatever that was, a year ago, talking about making hydrogen for fuel, right? What's it take to make hydrogen? It takes water. What kind of water? They want really clean water. Well, we're probably not gonna give them Truckee River water. So then you start looking at effluent, but they're basically doing like RO and you're gonna have a waste stream. So what do you do with the waste stream? So it's like, not here. So realize there's all these linkages to the wastewater side too that you need to take into account.
So are you gonna be looking for, you said the current practice is over 100 acres. And so are you looking at lowering that, or are you looking at board guidance, or what?
I think we will potentially be coming back for board guidance as this conversation progresses, right? So as this conversation continues between GoEd, EDON, and us, we really come up with a framework. We'll certainly be keeping you guys abreast of how that develops, and certainly if it becomes a need for us to pass new policy, of course, we'll be coming to you for that. Good, well, we're gonna stay on this kind of broad topic around where our community is growing to in the next few years, and go now, can we do the next one? Thank you. I'm gonna turn it back over to John Enlow here to talk about regional management influence and get your input on where we should continue, how we should consider our service area and what our planning area is in particular. Did I set that up okay, John? Perfect, okay.
So we call this our management influence because it's really bigger than just our service territory. Nate's gonna talk a little bit about service territory issues, but a good example is just, we were talking about it, the return flow management agreement and helping Tri-Gid with effluent. So here's an issue that's downstream that Tumwa has gotten involved with to help facilitate the efficient use of our community's water resources, right? And there's another one we're gonna talk about, Marlette Lake Water System. There's a lot of new board members on. Some of you may not even be familiar that we have a memorandum of understanding with Carson City and Story County on the potential use of water from the Marlette Lake Water System. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. That's been kind of in limbo for the last few years, but it's been resurrected again. And there's an opportunity for Tumwa to get involved in that water system. And in many years, they have surplus water. And how could we potentially utilize that surplus water from their water system? So, and Nate and Cara in particular, just the Truckee River, the forest management efforts. So we're reaching upstream, we're reaching downstream, we're reaching into Carson City. And it's really not necessarily our legal jurisdiction, right? According to our operating agreement that we have. So it's more than just a service territory issue, because I mean, we all are part of this interconnected water system. And so we've been trying to take a proactive and cooperative approach, working with these regional partners on how do we all manage water more efficiently. So we're gonna talk about a few of these topics here next.
Before we dive into the new ones, we just thought it'd be useful to remind you of where we're currently at. This is a current map of our service area. Within this service area, there's 2 main treatment plants, 3 hydroelectric plants. We have 87 wells across 90 wells or so across 9 different basins. And then 1 very large wholesale customer inside of this service area. You know, we probably should have included here, of course, all 5 of the lakes upstream, you know, from Lake Tahoe, Independence Lake on down, that, you know, we've been in that are part of our operation already. So you know, these new opportunities for us to be working within the broader watershed, if you will, are not new, just to review where we're at and kind of what we're already doing. Back to you, Emma.
Back to me. So
Yeah.
This kind of fits in the service area issue, but so a couple of months ago, I brought this up at a board meeting just to kind of tee it off. So Great Basin Water Company, they've got 2 relatively small water systems that they operate here in the Reno Sparks area. One is out in Cold Springs, and the other is in Spanish Springs, the Sky Ranch area, right? And Great Basin, I mean, private water utility, water and wastewater service provider. I wanted to talk a little bit about Sky Ranch because it's a current issue. So out there in the northern end of Spanish Springs, if you recall, we inherited some of the water systems from Washoe County with the merger. We knew nitrate was an issue in that area. And so we've been looking at the need for a nitrate groundwater treatment facility out there for some time. Great Basin, the Sky Ranch Water Utility, they also have 2 wells in their system that have been impacted by nitrate and arsenic as well. And so Great Basin, I was turning around looking to see if anybody was here from Great Basin, but I don't see anybody. I called James Eason, but he couldn't make it obviously. But they participated in a study that we were doing, looking at the feasibility of a groundwater treatment plant, basically just on the south side of La Posada, east of Pyramid Highway. And we've been working closely with the city of Sparks for the last year plus on that. And so, because Great Basin is a regulated utility, the Public Utility Commission gets involved, and they were very appreciative of TUMWA including Great Basin in this study, because they're gonna have to come up with some solution too. I mean, they've got their nitrate and arsenic levels are higher than ours. They're right, very close to the drinking water standard, and they've got whatever, 600 and some odd customers. So very expensive for that small customer base to afford a solution. So they've been working with us. How can we collaborate with TUMWA to try to find a solution for this? And this is an option that Great Basin and the Public Utility Commission asked us to get your input on. One of the things that they were throwing out is Tumwa potentially take over the Great Basin water system out there in Spanish Springs. And they're literally a hole in the dome. I mean, we surround here with our water systems out there. And so from just a simple water distribution standpoint, it's probably not that hard to do that. But there's gonna be a significant expense with the nitrate and arsenic treatment, so you'd have to figure out how to allocate those costs and so forth if we were to consider something like that. And this was actually an option that the Public Utility Commission threw out was, would Tumwa entertain swapping some of our satellite systems for the Sky Ranch system? We have South Lightning W down at the very south end of Washoe Valley. Stamp Mill Estates actually out near Fernley. We've got these small little water systems that honestly, they're kind of a pain for us to operate and maintain. However, they're under the Tumwa umbrella. You got the mothership that can come in and provide a lot of resources if there are problems with these small satellite systems. And honestly, that's kind of how the kind of Washoe County, Stimgid, that's how that evolved historically too. Sierra Pacific didn't want these small little water systems. Washoe County took over the small water systems and they developed and grew and then ultimately Tumwa took it over. But that was a question posed by the Public Utility Commission. Would Tumwa entertain a kind of a swap of some of our satellite systems if there was a way to take in the Sky Ranch system? They need customers, and Great Basin, the only way this works for them, they're trying to get a single water rate approved for all of their customers in Nevada. So they'd have a big customer base to spread their costs over. And that's really, whether that will even happen or not is anybody's guess. But I'm not gonna share what my personal opinion is, but I just wanna throw it out to you for your discussion to see if that's something that the board would like staff to entertain in any level of detail.
Yeah, we're not styled for action on this, and no motion, but we want your input on proceed with analysis and bring it back to the board, or is it just a hard no based on the factors?
Honestly, my concern is cost. My concern is that we're taking, I mean, we have our own issues out there that need to be there, so I think we need to know how much cost really it truly is. It makes sense in the sense of jurisdiction, but it doesn't make sense cost wise. I have talked to John a little bit about this a little while ago, so there's some information in my brain that goes to, didn't he also talk about making a contract with us at one time? Isn't that one of the pieces on this? There a contract, wasn't there another third option they talked about?
Oh, well, part of it is they pay for some proportionate share of the groundwater treatment plant, and then we end up wholesaling water back to them. I mean, that I think is probably John Engineer hat solution. That's probably the best solution from.
That's what I said.
They could get.
That's my brother.
They could probably get their problem fixed for the lowest cost. And it would help us because we'd have a partner helping pay for the cost of this treatment plant and that type of thing. And we could probably make that work pretty easily. So some of the things I've thought of, so if you were a customer in one of our small water systems, what would you think about it? Would you like to have Great Basin Water Company be your water purveyor, or would you want to have Tumwa as your water purveyor? And again, personal opinion, this is not to bash the Public Utility Commission or regulated utilities, but they don't operate the same way as Tumwa does. Water quality, number one, right? Reliability, redundancy, customer service. I'll just say that I don't think regulated utilities have that same level of service as Tumwa does. And so if you were one of those customers in a satellite system, what would you?
Well, I'll just say, I've always thought it's a goal to have fewer of these small water systems than more. Because the management capability, the ability to have reserves, the ability to have a repair and replacement fund, et cetera. And then when big initiatives come, when it was arsenic or whatever's the next grade, if it's PFAS, whatever, they don't have the financial capability. So then they end up, another thing that I did was manage the grants to small water systems program at the state. And these smaller systems, under 10,000 customers, were eligible for these grants, and they needed them to be able to come into compliance to meet water quality standards. So, but those grants aren't endless, and it was sort of a once and done, understanding that we're not gonna support your utility forever. It's like a fix, but when I was there, we required that they update their management practices and their accounting practices. I wasn't just gonna give them money and say, hey, have a nice day. Like, it had to become more sustainable. So I think from a small water system, I think it'd be better to have someone out there. But so I'm not sure if it's a trade thing. I mean, I think it's like an all thing. Like if we're taking over Great Basin with 550 customers, how many of these small systems are there, and what is their customer size? I don't have a good understanding of what we're talking about.
I mean, the swap was really with our small systems. How many do we have left? On top of your head? 6, I think.
5?
Yeah, and total number of customers in all our small water systems, 500 or 600 maybe.
Right.
Scattered around, so it's not a lot.
Well, it's not very efficient for us to serve them. But on the other hand, probably the water quality and the experience is better for the people, right? And you've got a larger group backing you, when things go right. So I don't know, like, we can just sit here and say, do this or do that, but I mean, I think there's a lot of considerations here as far as the people themselves. I'm not sure, I mean, you mentioned Fernley, so how many of these are outside Washoe County?
Stamp Mill is in Washoe County, right?
But it's by Fernley.
Right.
Okay. So I'm just saying there's some pros for having fewer small water systems that are independently managed, generally from a state policy.
And Great Basin Water Company, I mean, they're a good company, don't get me wrong. I mean, they provide a service for sure. It's just being a regulated utility is operated differently than Tumwa, for sure. Speaking from someone who's had experience working under both regimes.
Right.
So.
Can we keep it and help Skyridge?
So.
Or is it just too much
Yeah.
money?
I'll share some. So we're doing everything we can to not build this groundwater treatment plant because it's really expensive. And it's basically gonna be a cost that's borne by existing customers. It isn't something that new development is paying for. It's existing customers are gonna pay for it.
Is that true though? I mean, isn't there new development out in that general?
There's already, I forget what the number is, 1,500 acre feet of will serve committed water rights on these wells that are temporarily getting service from our excess capacity in our surface water system because we have this problem with the groundwater quality. At some point, we need to fix that problem one way or the other. We're looking at every solution we can not to build this groundwater treatment plant if we can avoid it, because it will be, I don't know how many customers there are out, there's probably 3,000 customers that rely on that water, but you're talking about a $25 to $30 million groundwater treatment plant. So it's significant.
The thing that comes to my mind is that this group is not gonna give us this. They're gonna want to get paid for their thing, because they're a business. So that right there, I get the trade, but our job's not to make a business right. We gotta take care of our people, and that part's real, but I think we need to be real careful, we're not, I mean, and we found that the need is for the people is greater than the need for this group, but I don't think it's our business of trying to make a business right just because whatever problems they have. And so if there's a way we can contractually or do whatever, that makes sense to me, but for us to go and spend all this money, buy this business, so they feel whole, while we are not whole.
Right, I know.
That's like a negative, that's going the wrong direction.
And that's not what Tupper would do. I mean, we just taking over these small water systems, it's like, okay, we're not impacting our existing customer costs to do it. I mean, that's one of our number one goals. I mean, to your point, I mean, we are trying to figure out a way to help these 550 customers, whatever it is out there, but they're in a spot. Yeah. And if we don't build this groundwater treatment plant, they're gonna be in a lot bigger room. So then they'll have to do it on their own, and then they'll really see it.
Well, are there any analogs with what we did up in town or anything?
I mean, the problem is, I mean, they have groundwater rights to pump, and we've looked at supplying them. Physically, you could supply them with surface water, but then there's the cost of the surface water right. And now we're consuming however many acre feet of surface water to serve those existing customers that rely on groundwater. So there's all kinds of reasons.
Well, guess what? The 7 of us don't know the answer.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know.
I'm just
Well,
saying.
And I think what we were looking for is input on,
Exactly.
Policy.
should we plan around this, at least to put enough effort towards trying to look at different scenarios for it. And I think what we've heard is that it is worth continuing to talk about and explore and plan around. We wanted to make sure we weren't allocating resources and acknowledging in the plan if it was actually a non-starter with everybody, so.
Well, it's people. We all manage those people. They're all part of our constituents. They all need water. The better water is better. You know, clean, good water is better. So I don't think we're looking for this, but it may come looking for us anyway.
Paul, did you want to add something?
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to make a comment, going back to what you said, John, about if I was a customer of one of the outlying, small locations, I would not be pleased if I was being pulled from Tumwa and, I'm not volunteering to do it, and the next thing I know, I have another provider that may or may not provide the same service. So that would be one that I really don't know that we even want to spend time on that one. But possibility of a contract, I think it's a good thing to be a good neighbor, a good community partner and try and help folks. But we've got to be careful that it's not at the expense of our customers. So I think that's the bottom line. So yes, I think researching it and looking to see some options, but yeah, we just got to be cautious on that.
I think that summarizes really the approach we've been taking so far. So we just wanted to make sure that we weren't going off on some tangent that you guys didn't like or like. So I have good marching orders, so.
So we're gonna take about an 8-minute break till about 3, is that right? Just stretch, get something more to drink, bathroom, all that stuff, dessert. Okay.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Give me your card. They want to stop.
Recording in progress.
Thanks everyone for doing our short break. We're gonna reconvene back to the team here. I don't know if it's back to Nate or someone.
Back to me. What you
Back to
guys,
Eddie.
Eddie, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, and again, as we go through kind of these new programs, priorities that we're considering for this next plan, again, we really just appreciate your input on whether we're headed in the right direction at this point. So, yeah, Eddie, you wanna
So
kick things off on this next one?
So Marlette Lake Water System, so this is some of you are familiar with the MOU that was done between Carson, Story, and Tumwa. I was on the other side of the table with Carson in those days, that was in 2021, that MOU got signed. The basis of that was a understanding that we'd all work together as long as Story was first in priority, Carson was second for their demands. And then Tumwa would get excess water that wasn't needed in surplus years, like what John alluded to. So currently, there's been changes at the state, people come and go, it gets reset. We're currently restarting this whole project and this idea of getting Tumwa into the mix, but also keeping that priority that I just went over. We're updating that MOU, so that MOU will be coming to you fairly soon here, next few months maybe. That keeps that priority, we're just refreshing it a little bit, refreshing the language, the parties have better ideas of their demands now, et cetera. The other parties wanted that done, they're also working on, Carson and Story are working on long-term agreements with the state. They've been working on those for quite a long time now. And part of this, they wanna wrap that into this. And we're gonna work towards a long-term agreement, possibly with everybody included in that agreement, Story, Carson, and Tumwa, within the long-term agreement. So there's multiple layers to this one. Another thing we need to do is a water rights permitting process to include Tumwa as a wholesale customer for that excess water. So that's another priority that we're pursuing. So this is all got re-kickstarted and it's happening quickly. We've had a few rounds of the new MOU in draft form and it's progressing. So we wanted to update you all. This was in the last water resource plan and continue to be in this one.
So last time, we had some political woes over this from Carson City. Is that still, I remember that, we got calls from the mayor, it was.
Right.
So can you, for a moment, let us know where we're at?
Yes, I can
As you
most
come.
definitely do that. So the MOU was the satisfier on that.
Okay.
So that was what the first MOU did. The second MOU is continuing that.
So no one,
That
we have the politicals in line.
we've met with them last month and went over all this again. You know, their big priority, honestly, is that long-term agreement. They want to secure their demands and Carson City's building a new treatment plant currently at Quill. Story's looking into their future of what they'll need and they have their demand numbers. So we're rehashing everything so we can continue to move the train down the line.
so for those that don't know, isn't this where we have the siphon? Or we have water from Marlette Lake going to Virginia City,
Yes,
right? When you say Story County,
yes,
it's really Virginia City.
it's Virginia City. They're looking at their demands in the Highlands, Virginia Highlands, also at American Flats, not American Flats in North Valleys, but the what was American Flats at the mining place where Comstock Mine is.
Right,
So they're
and
looking at
then
those.
wasn't this whole concept to provide water reliability and interconnection to with Carson City, and wasn't there something to with Dayton? I can't remember. There was another, I think, thought agreement between Carson City Virginia, was it Mendon, Gardnerville? I don't know, I thought there was a third city, either Dayton or, I didn't think it was Mendon.
There's Silver City and Gold Hill that also get water from the,
No, it was
siphon?
like Dayton.
okay.
There was like a interconnect thing
Well,
where Stagecoach or
She's talking
something.
about the business stuff that goes down there.
Yeah, so I mean, there's an interconnection between Minden, Carson and Dayton. They have a pipeline that goes across the cities.
I
You
mean,
know,
like what we
eventually
were
someday it
Sure.
could be all interconnected.
Well,
talked
we're,
about
we
that.
we were doing this up in the North Valleys too, we were gonna try to, didn't work out with Stonegate and was it Great Basin?
Oh, just interconnection.
Yeah.
Right,
For reliability,
right.
but that one didn't go.
Yeah, right. This one really was just,
Marlette, Virginia City, Parsons.
yeah. And Tumblr being able, we could use some of the surplus water up for.
Which is very interesting, and they have surplus water,
Mhm.
like, we'll have to
Now
talk
they
about.
do, yeah. In the future, at their build out demands, we'll see, but when those hit, you know, it's up in the air. And so right now, we're starting with the Marlette Lake side, that's 3,000 acre feet. There's the Franktown side, which they get interconnected when the tunnel was there that took water from Marlette over to the siphon that you're talking about. So just wanted to bring that back up and we'll kick it back on.
Any other questions or comments on that topic before we move on? Great.
Great. So this is a topic that you all have seen several times in the past year or 2 years. We just wanted to bring it up. It's one of our other kind of, management influence pieces. So as you know, Tumwa is a member of the Middle Truckee River Watershed Forest Partnership, also with the Tahoe National Forest, National Forest Foundation, Truckee River Watershed Council, and the Nature Conservancy. We established that MOU in 2022. And our goal is to treat over 60,000 acres with targeted forest restoration practices. And we have a 10-year vegetation management plan to identify those project areas, which are shown here on the map in the Middle Truckee River Watershed, which basically spans from the outlet at Tahoe City to the California-Nevada state line, where all of our water supply reservoirs are located besides Lake Tahoe. And TUM was involved to help decrease the threat of severe wildfires near our community sources of drinking water supplies. The effort, including environmental planning and implementation, is expected to cost around $140 million. And it's important to note that TUM was not actually implementing the projects on the ground. NFF and the Tahoe National Forest and the Watershed Council are really implementing the projects, but we are supporting the partnership in other ways. We're currently taking a really active approach in developing a funding and financing plan for the partnership to identify innovative funding approaches. And so our goals are to protect communities from wildfire impacts, protect our water supplies and infrastructure, and improve overall forest health and resilience. So, with the fire last week, this is certainly something that could impact our supplies. So that's why we're taking such a proactive approach in hopefully preventing or mitigating severe fire from happening in our region.
Questions?
Huge kudos to Cara. I mean, she spent a lot of time working on this in the last few years, so it's very significant.
And are you gonna give a talk on this next week? Is this what you're gonna
We'll be
talk about?
talking at the Desert Research Institute AWE Plus Summit on Wednesday, and Alexis is also good.
This Wednesday,
Yes, yeah,
but will it cover this?
it will, yes,
Yeah.
this is the topic.
Good, so moving on to the next topic, Enlo, we're gonna hand it back to you to talk about return flow management.
Yeah, and again, this is all under that umbrella of Tumwa's regional management influence, right? But I mean, I remember when we started working on helping Tumwa out with this maybe 2016 or 17 kind of timeframe, so it's been a long time in the works, but Trigen actually started taking deliveries of water from Tumwa, what day? July 2nd. So, long time coming. They're taking on the order of 1 million gallons a day or so right now. So it's good. I mean, it's good for all the parties. I mean, it keeps treated effluent out of the river. There's this was the point I was trying to make earlier, that it's not just free water to use effluent. We have to come up with other water resources to leave in the river to keep the downstream users whole. And so this table here is just a summary of the different water rights, and a lot of these are kind of leased or temporary uses of water. I mean, we're still working with Reno and Sparks and the tribe and others to try again to come up with kind of a permanent water rights allocation for this, but their demand for the water compared to when they thought they were gonna need 4,000 acre feet of water really quick, it's gonna take years to get to that point. So, but I feel sorry for Sherry Whalen, the general manager out there at the GID, because their demand information changes on a daily basis, it seems like. It's like, we have too much water, and then it's like, we don't have enough water. I mean, they've literally put a RO treatment system on they got a effluent reservoir like South Turkey Meadows does. It's not as big, but so they're doing reverse osmosis on, it's full. I mean, it was brim full. Sherry was worried about it spilling. So they put an RO treatment system on it, and they're pumping that water out and delivering a lot of that water to get the water levels in the reservoir down. But I mean,
So where's it going to?
so it's supplying data centers
Yeah.
predominantly, and Tesla and Panasonic and
But I
so
mean,
forth.
they're doing a different version of, they're doing advanced treatment of this reclaimed water.
Right,
We already added increased treatment at the plant at Tumwater, right? Before we even sent it. As I recall.
they're having to treat it because of certain constituents in it
Yeah.
that causes scaling after a period of time, so that's why they're doing the reverse osmosis.
Taking
But-
out salt.
And just none of that water goes back to the river. So it's a self-contained system, very expensive, it's called zero liquid discharge, so they basically evaporate all of it, you concentrate all the stuff into a smaller quantity of water and then evaporate the water. So you can imagine how energy intensive that is. But, so this is something that Tum was responsible for on the return flow management, and I mean, from our perspective, for the newer board members, I mean, we got involved in this because, again, of the water rights issues and trying to be as efficient as possible with water rights that are used for the return flow. Because they could have just gone out there and bought up a whole bunch of Truckee River water rights, right? And then that just takes away from what's available to this community for economic development in the future. And so that's really why Tumwa stepped in years ago to try to help manage these water resources as efficiently as possible. So back to Eddie's Bartlett Lake water system, that's one of the potential uses of that water. Is maybe we just use it for return flow. We don't need to, it might not be there year in, year out, but we might be able to use it to help satisfy return flow.
And water quality wise, wasn't there something like a match, like here you have it's similar, right, to Tahoe?
Oh, yeah, it's very good, high quality water, and maybe instead, they literally pump it out of Marlette Lake up and over the hill and down to Carson City and Virginia City. Maybe you just open the valve and flow that water through Lake Tahoe, and it satisfies return flows in the Truckee River. And they use the water on the east slope that they're trying to develop for. So it's things like that, being efficient with the resources in the community. So we talked, there's future things, I mean, we've got this, I don't know, John, if you want to talk about it, the NV Energy Agreement, they may not be familiar with that, but.
Yeah, so before I got here, that's a great idea to exchange drought supply water for NV Energy's bucket of water. They have a couple thousand acre feet. We get to use that while they don't, a certain portion of it while they don't use it, but if they ever needed a drought supply, we could release our drought reserves for that. And it also a great idea of the first right of refusal on that water, since they have such a surplus, if they ever sold it, we could get to purchase it.
Yeah, that right of first refusal idea actually came out of the last water resource plan workshop when you had talked about the ranch area.
Right. Right, because I don't know if you guys all remember, but Ranchera, they bought up the Harris, they had all this water. They sold it very quickly down to Trick, a bunch of it, and they needed to keep at least some of it to water the property. But almost more important in a way was they're getting the water off the lake ditch and just taking all that water away. There wasn't really enough head to carry all the water down for all the other users, so they're continuing to pay $20,000 for maintenance of that lake ditch system. So there was a lot of things that had to happen, but yeah, I was very worried that if people just started selling their water out of Washoe County and down the river, this is not good for us. So I'm glad, good.
Well, on this one, there's a lot of hard work with Eddie, Nate, John, Bill, and staff with just all the water rate changes we had to do, meetings, discussions, settlements with the tribe, to make it all work. So it's a lot of work.
It is, and I think that's real reason why we wanted to bring this up for discussion again, because we are kind of coordinating this for the region.
Yeah.
Right, not just for the sole benefit of Tumwa alone, right? And so, I think it's important that we continue to get your input and direction on that this is the function that Tumwa should be playing regionally, right? So that's why it's important that we brought it up for discussion again.
The way I look at it is if we're not involved, you're not at the table. And things could go in a completely opposite direction of what you want. So even though it utilizes resources, plus you've got a lot of talent here that know a lot about this, so I think that lends well for these situations.
Good input, thank you. We're gonna kind of keep on this line of discussion, talking about future resources, but we did break the next topic out as its own category because it's another level of complexity, and that's this topic of direct potable reuse. Which I know a bunch of you have probably already had some anecdotal conversations here and there throughout the community, but John, I'm gonna give it back to you one more time to facilitate the presentation. We'll take conversation from there.
Okay. So, you're all familiar with indirect potable reuse, and just history lesson again, that the kind of requirement for those regulations that the state adopted back in 2016 evolved out of the 2015 drought task force that Governor Sandoval initiated. And that was actually Tumwa's recommendation, was we needed to have indirect potable reuse regulations for the state because it actually gave us a target to shoot for. So that was super helpful back then, and really we couldn't do anything without those regulations. And what we're almost 8-10 years later, and we're still implementing these types of big projects. They just take a long time. And so that's really where this topic of direct potable reuse has come about. So the difference between indirect and direct potable reuse has an environmental buffer. You can recharge it into the groundwater and pull it out again later, or you could put it into a surface water reservoir, release it, and then pull it out of a river later and run it through the treatment plant. Direct potable reuse removes that environmental buffer from the process, so it's basically more treatment steps in lieu of that environmental Mother Nature step, I like to call it. But California is adopting direct potable reuse regulations currently. Colorado has adopted direct potable reuse regulations. Arizona's right behind them. Texas is right behind them. So it's really kind of the next evolution of potable reuse. And so there's been, this is where Nate, you can help me out with this water omnibus bill, that it's different water issues throughout the state that
That's right,
explain it for me.
there's a pretty diverse group statewide that has worked together on putting just a large package of proposed legislative changes just into one bill, rather than trying to push several through the state legislature. One of those topics that we have been involved in providing input on is including direct potable reuse. And really only at this stage to the level where the legislature would just be signaling its support for figuring out how to do this. To date, we don't think it's necessary that the legislature provide any like direct orders to state staff. We think the staff at NDEP is gonna work with us on it, so, but it is part of that general omnibus bill.
And so, Leo Drozdov is Tumwa's lobbyist, and he was working behind the scenes, and he was working with Nate and Steph and others on this water omnibus language, and kind of got off the rails a little bit a couple of months ago, but Leo worked his magic and got everybody back together, including Southern Nevada and so forth. And so right now, there's this draft language in there that basically says NDP is encouraging the development of direct potable reuse regulations for the state. So that being said, so Jennifer Carr, as the administrator at NDEP, she worked as part of the stakeholder group back in 2015-16 on the indirect potable reuse regulations. And so we've been talking with her. The city of Sparks actually got involved in that discussion indirectly with Tom Wharf's discharge permit and how challenging, at least their draft discharge permit, how challenging that would be to meet. And so they were seeking potentially direct potable reuse regulations too. So Leo and Tumwa, we've kind of jumped in to corral this effort a little bit and manage it. I think we had Tumwa had a very significant role back in 2016 in the development of those regulations. There were a big stakeholder group, Sparks, Washington County, Carson was involved, rurals were involved, Southern Nevada was involved, but it was really this community pushing for it because of what we wanted to try to do at Reno Stead with that project. But Jennifer Carr really liked that approach the last time, and so she's reached out and basically asked us to take the first cut at developing direct potable reuse regulations, a draft of those regulations for the state to consider. I mean, the state just doesn't have the staff to be able to lead that effort currently. I mean, they've lost a bunch of people. Honestly, I think there's a lot of earned trust that we've gained at the state with all of the work and transparency on the American Flat project that we've done. And so we're gonna, over the next year, she's actually hoping we could propose something by end of June, 1st of July of next year that the State Environmental Commission may be able to carry through. And they've got a process for public review of these draft regulations and so forth. And so if it were just Tumwa doing it, we probably wouldn't be in that big of a hurry. It's something that we wanted to do. Honestly, the groundwater recharge of the indirect potable reuse project, it's the hardest part. Trying to figure out how to make that work. It's literally the hard, you wouldn't think, it's the hardest part.
And the expensive, so could you remind me how, using American Flat, how much of that whole project is recharge?
30% or so, probably.
So if it was direct potable, you would have it potentially at 30% less.
Yeah.
Of a cost.
And this is where, I mean, City of Reno staff, we all want American Flat to go forward, to prove the concept, to get the permits in place, to get the public acceptance in place, because direct potable reuse is harder to get the public buy-in than indirect potable reuse. Everybody likes that environmental buffer, that Mother Nature step in there. It provides just time, and it's not as immediate as going from here's your direct potable reuse plant into the drinking water system. But that being said, these regulations that these other states have adopted have a lot of redundancy and reliability built into them. And honestly, Nevada's indirect potable reuse regulations are more stringent than some states' direct potable reuse regulations. I mean, back then, we used the information that was available to us to try to adopt something that was protective of public health, right? I mean, that was our first objective, protect public health. So we adopted very stringent regulations. We're paying for it a little bit now, but it's, personally, I think it's the right thing to do based on what we knew at the time. I think actually getting to direct potable reuse regulations will be a lot simpler now. I mean, there's a decade has gone by, there's a lot more known. So I think it'll be a fairly, knock on wood, fairly straightforward process to try to take a first cut at these regulations. And we're gonna fix some of they were omissions at the time in 2016 with the indirect potable reuse regulations. For example, operator certification requirements. It's not clear whether it's a water operator or a wastewater operator. There's confusion there, so we want to correct that. The regulations sit in the wastewater side of NDEP, but it's a drinking water project. So we're having to make a special request of NDEP. Please review this as a potable drinking water project too. So we can fix that as we go forward. So I think it's really kind of an exciting time over the next year with direct potable reuse regulations. And I think I've mentioned this to most of you, but we have just a conceptual feasibility study of a direct potable reuse project that we're doing with the city of Sparks in Spanish Springs, where we would potentially shave off some of their raw wastewater flow and build a satellite treatment plant out in Spanish Springs that could treat the water to this very high level and use it directly back into the distribution system again. And I mean, it was really Michael and I talking about this through a lot of different discussions, but it will help, assuming something like that goes forward. There's that capacity issue between Reno Sparks and the county on Tum Wharf and Spanish Springs and everything. A project like this could help satisfy and solve that capacity issue. It could defer significant improvements at Tum Wharf to help meet their discharge permit requirement if you could peel off 5 million gallons a day or so of flow before it even gets there. And it helps us from the water supply standpoint and even the water rights standpoint. Eddie and I are noodling on it, but you almost get a twofer with direct potable reuse, because once you use that water, it's gonna go out, but then it's gonna come back and go out and come back and go out and come back. You lose a lot as it happens, but you almost get 2 acre feet of supply for every 1 acre foot of that first amount of water that you divert. So it's kind of like this perpetual water machine. You gotta wrap your head around it, but it's kind of cool. But if we could prove up both indirect potable reuse at American Flat and direct potable reuse, and starting with Tum Wharf, and again, satisfy all the return flow requirements and everything in the process, but that could be a huge benefit to the long-term water rights sustainability issue. Eddie was talking about, okay, we only have this many more Truckee River water rights to use. We didn't count the couple thousand acre feet of American Plat. We're not counting on this direct potable reuse yet. But again, it's an investment for the long-term sustainable water supply in the region. So pretty cool. Thanks, John. We'll get Southern Nevada Water Authority involved. We'll get the rules involved. Similar process as last time, but yeah, it'll be fun.
Questions, comments on that?
My only comment, and I don't want a big discussion, I just want to say, I've been thinking a lot, you just mentioned Southern Nevada. I just keep thinking, can this indirect or direct potable reuse help them? I know they have to have a certain amount of return flow to the Colorado, but I'm wondering if they have access beyond, I think they have to return 280,000 acre feet or something, I don't know. But anyway, has that ever come up in your conversations?
I mean, I think it all depends on what happens with Lake Mead.
Right.
You know, it's a unique, for them to discharge into their own reservoir already, it's a pretty unique
right.
System nationally, right? That if you don't have to pay for additional treatment, why do it? But again, the lake could get to a point where it is cheaper to directly treat it, but it's hard to say. I think statewide, at least the folks that we've talked with, having as many tools in the toolbox as possible is, everybody sees as beneficial. So if we can get the regulations set up before the need, you know, the immediate need is quite there, I think everybody in the state is gonna be supportive of that.
Well, I think the need is there since they stopped their pipeline from northern Nevada, from White Pine County, and they need something. They've been talking about it for a good 25 years, the alternates, the, you know, options besides Colorado River.
Yeah, so far they have been, you know, participating and, you know, this would not be on the agenda if it were just them. They wouldn't have initiated the conversation, but, you know, they're certainly supportive of us pursuing it and participate in the discussion so far.
Well, I think we better turn to, you know, wrap this section up and turn to
Thank you.
our.
Thank you, yeah, and we'll take all this input, put that into the rest of our build out on the plan. Cara, you wanna just quickly remind everybody the rest of the process for publishing this plan?
Yep, so as presented to the board in April of this year, we presented a timeline, so our anticipated draft plan to the board is April of 2025. We'll be looking for comments on that draft plan, and then we'll put it out for public comment for about 2 months, from June to July of 2025. In August, we'll bring a revised draft plan to the board for final comments, and then in September or October, we will bring a final plan to the board for
Of a year
approval.
from now.
Yes, a year from, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we'll close this out, and I wanna make sure we have covered 8 sufficiently as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're gonna try to cover a couple agenda items or topics. One is 9, about our corporate campus needs, and I'm gonna start right off by saying there's a shortage of parking. I did not park today,
Because on purpose.
what's that, really?
Get here early.
I was gonna go out in the bike lane, I went over to our campus parking, I'm like, yeah, I think I'm gonna have to park in a 15 minutes. So, tell us, I know that's a very minor part of this, but.
She's in the handicap.
Yeah, so
I'm not in the handicap, I am not, I'm in a 15-minute. I even went out to move my car, but there was no option, so.
Dan, Your Honor, Assistant General Manager, Director of Engineering for the record. We were here in October last year talking about having just lost out on a property next door.
Right.
And looking around going, okay, where are we gonna put extra people? Where are we gonna put buildings? Where are we gonna put parking? Especially with a lot of field staff that have one car to park here and one to take out into the field.
Right.
And in the staff report, there's a slides just from back in October where it seems like every couple of years, I call these the base hits. We expand, we add 8 things here, we expand 5,000 square feet there, we add a fueling center, we do this, and we're kind of tinkering. And so the agenda item in front of you is actually purchasing a building that Sonia's gonna throw the location map up here. It's just northeast of us, across Wall Street to 1285 Financial. They were actually the same property owners that we made an offer to next door. And they were looking to move out of that this fall and put it on the market. And we said, hey, would you entertain an off-market offer from us? So we got an appraisal. We made an offer to them of $7.4 million.
So before you go on, can you locate us here on this
Yeah,
map?
so the blue is our parcel.
Yeah.
The red roof on the southwest corner is the building that we're in right now.
Yeah.
There we go. And then the red parcel, 1285, is actually the parcel that, the subject parcel we were talking about purchasing.
And originally you were looking at next door,
Yeah,
which one?
just to the big square to the east.
That one right there.
Yeah. So that one, we made an offer, we lost, primarily having to come back to the board and go through their timing with their closing situation. So anyways, we kind of tried to get ahead of that this time. We went to them off market, without brokers and said, we have this, this appraisal, we have this need, we have it in our budget. So let's make a deal. So we made them an offer, they accepted, subject to your approval. And the recommended motion and the recommendation is to authorize the general manager to close that transaction and sign any documents to make that happen. So that's the high level, about the same as what I put in the staff report.
Can you just recap for us, like the price and the square footage?
Yeah. Yeah, the price, the offer made was $7.4 million. The building is 40,000 square feet on 3.5 acres.
And
What was it that we lost, 13, 15, is it similar?
It was, I believe, 36,000 square feet on 5 acres and it went for 6.8. It's gonna be my career thorn in my side.
No, forgive yourself.
That's right.
We did ask the owner who bought it, who was making improvements, we said, hey, what would it take? And he said, $12 million, I'm not moving my company.
oh, you already moved in.
He moved in and, yeah, he said, I'm not moving my people again. You can call me in 20 years, so. So yeah, that's the item in front of you, if there's any.
What would you plan to do? You know, what would you move or what would you do? with
So
this
the very first need, right now is warehousing and indoor parking space for the large trucks that need to be, in a heated space, the vacuum trucks that have, fluid systems. And so what we would do is we'd actually shift some of our warehouse space over there to free up some indoor parking space on campus. We would also create some additional, parking is a big first need.
It kind of is.
Yeah, and then we've talked about, they have some, it's currently a fake eyelash distribution and training center, so they have a little bit of office space. But like it's a big pink wall and set up, so we would kind of make sure to get that, but it'd be a combination of warehouse, office space, no eyelashes. So, if you wanna get your eyelashes done, get over there.
Go now.
Maybe we bring people back home in a sense that are out there in different places, is that good?
We've talked about and called it the campus as a reason to have kind of this central location. It's still separate, but it's not a mile away, it's right across the street. So that's the goal, is trying to keep everybody together as much as possible. So, like for instance, in the summer, we have our conservation staff is over at Longley Treatment Plant, kind of in the lobby, shoved into some break rooms and stuff. So that would be a group right away to bring back into the fold and part of the normal campus.
And potentially permanent spot for the tumble board meetings going forward.
So would that be in that building or would we build on top or
Potentially, or we create a.
something here? Well, I'm in full support.
Yeah.
Good job.
Me
Let's do it. Let's make it.
What's the TI cost?
It's probably $1 million to $2 million.
That would come at a later time after. you
We
get into a
would
deep-
analyze it, make sure what we're doing, and then it would
Plan
come
it
through
out.
the CIP
I was just
process.
curious what the TI.
Yeah, that's what
And
we're thinking right now.
How old is the building?
It's about 30 years old.
Okay.
So gonna need a little work.
I do wanna remind staff too, if you remember, because of some of the some of our loan things we did, we actually this last year brought in quite a bit that, not that it would preclude the idea of doing it either way, but we did have a really good year in that sense, that we had some extra money come in on the selling of those.
Yeah, the refinancing.
The refinancing.
$12 million sale.
Yeah.
Savings.
I'm sure they'd like a cash offer.
They did. They liked it.
Bless you.
And we also have a provision for them to lease back through the end of the year for free. Basically, they're in the process of starting moving. They're actually going out to Sparks. They have a lot of building out there, so.
You like fake eyelashes and sparks, come on over.
If you ever get a chance to meet them, they're
Who are they?
Michelle is her name, and she basically built that from scratch, and they're a worldwide
Worldwide Web?
distributor
Eyelashes.
of eyelashes.
Multi-million-dollar
Fake eyelashes. Yeah.
Who would have known?
Yeah.
Eyelashes.
There are.
Eyelashes for all staff.
Of the right.
So yeah, with that, we'd be looking for the motion to authorize the GM to sign all the documents to bring this transaction to a close.
So moved.
No.
Second.
Chair,
Yes,
motion in a second.
yes,
Who made the motion?
I did.
Mr. Reese.
okay, thank you. Member Reese and
I'll make a second.
member Anderson made the second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Good job, exciting. Super exciting.
Now you're redeemed.
It's gonna work out much better.
I wouldn't think about it at all.
It's gonna work out much better.
I mean, it's bigger,
Bigger.
about the same. All right, we're gonna move on to item 10, which is about the evaluation for our general manager and just sort of queuing it up. And let me turn to Jessica Atkinson.
Thank you. For the record, Jessica Atkinson, in front of you for discussion and potential action is the board packet pertaining to the general manager's performance evaluation for this year. As you guys recall, in the general manager contract, which is dated 2022, it states that he receives an annual evaluation. We time that to take place when we do our strategic planning session in October, which is why I'm coming to you a little bit ahead of that, is to just discuss the process and the plan for this year to make sure that we are a go, and if we need to make any tweaks, we can make any tweaks. So for this year, staff is recommending that the board approve following the same process as what we followed last year, with a couple slight tweaks, and really those tweaks are what I would consider non-material changes to just titling, rating labels, and instructions. The former survey that we sent out through SurveyMonkey said it was an evaluation survey, and that really is not expressing what that survey is. Really what that survey is a feedback survey. Individuals from board members to Mr. Zimmerman's direct reports are providing feedback that is then turned over to the board to inform them to actually conduct the performance evaluation in a public setting in October. So those are really the only changes that we made were to some of those titles, but the process that we're recommending this year is the same as what we've done before. The feedback questionnaire will still have the 7 same rating categories as what the board had previously approved. I'm not gonna read through them, they're in your staff report. And then there's a feedback rating scale for each of those with the options for exceeds, meets, areas for growth, and not applicable. And then each of the categories is followed by an open comment field. If the board approves moving forward with this, the timelines are also included in your staff report. So starting the kickoff is today's board meeting. And then in the September meeting, you would receive a presentation of the results for the FY 2024 general manager goals. And then September 19th, we would distribute the performance feedback survey through SurveyMonkey. And that would be open from the 19th through October 4th. That would be the deadline to submit survey responses, giving a 16-day survey period. Some reminders along the way and gentle nudges are generally needed. And then during the October 16th board meeting, we would give a presentation of those survey responses so that the official performance evaluation be conducted in a public setting. And that's really the process in a nutshell. So I'm just looking for your guys' feedback. And
so one of the things I always like is to, when I'm reviewing the feedback survey, one thing I would like to always have is John's either self-assessment or goals that he laid out last year and where he thinks he is in terms of achieving those. Now, I know we're gonna go over orally at the meeting or presentation wise, but is that possible?
it absolutely is. So when I send the link to the SurveyMonkey survey, I send it via email. I can include, and we've done that in the past, that report that he provides the board with that outlines his results for those goals.
That would be so helpful.
Yep.
Because I always like to help review that and incorporate it.
Absolutely.
The other thing is, and we do these for so many directors, I don't remember of this one, how it worked electronically. Some of them are easier to fill out than others. Some of them have, for the comment space, they don't have a restriction on the text number or the character number. Some do, some, you can format the text. I mean, the more that you can put into it that way of ease of filling out, the better, obviously.
Absolutely.
Do you recall from last time? I'm sure.
So we don't limit the text and
the character.
and it also should not, when the
Reduce
information
size.
comes out, like shrink as you write more.
Yeah.
So we should be fine there, but I will double check it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't recall any issues last round.
I know, well, we do, regional planning and
Yeah.
we do this one and that one, there are just so many, and some of them are kind of pretty glitchy. Even at City Arena, we've had that update our ability to do it. Like some come out with PDF fillable forms.
Those ones are most difficult, I find.
Yeah. A little bit challenging.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments? I appreciate the heads up so we can get ready and so fewer of us can be late. Thank you for the nudges.
Move to approve.
Do we need to approve?
Yes. This is an action item that you're approving the
Okay.
schedule and the process for this year's evaluation.
So we have a motion from Mr. Adair and second from Mr. Reese. Any further conversation? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. We're on our way there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, general manager's report.
Thank you, Chair Dorr. So just wanted to give an update on that, the Gold Ranch fire, the Burnite fire. We did have to scramble a lot of our maintenance staff, operations staff, putting generators everywhere. Darren Garland is our water operations treatment supervisor, Phil Raymond, who you all know right behind him. But I just wanted to give a lot of congratulations to that staff, because even though the fire didn't last but a couple days, it really made us scramble. There's a lot of work on the back end on the Toma side and communicating with NV Energy and the fire department.
So what systems were at risk here?
So I have no systems or risk, but I have either Will or Darren Garland come up and give a few comments. I know it's general manager comments. Look at this team and make sure we're.
Yeah.
Sure. So we had Darren Garland, by the way, for the record. So we had our Boomtown system, which is to the west there, was primarily what was at risk. So we got a lot of great people who were working on that. So I was happy to see everybody come together.
But what were we doing?
Oh, on our end, well, we have NV Energy that essentially, during a portion of it, we lost power to that. And with that loss of power, that caused us to have to get our generators prepared for it, or we had to get generators rolling for it and take generators out there and.
So we didn't have them out there. We had to bring them out there, is that what you're saying?
Correct. At the time, we needed to bring in the generators to get that prepared for the systems.
Wow.
Yeah. So we were able to, provide that power. We were able to keep an eye on the Truckee River itself, and we had our operators, we had our groups just keeping an eye on the water and the river itself that was coming in, making sure we wouldn't have any particular difficulty with treating what was coming in. Chalk Bluff stayed up and stayed operational during that whole time. We put out just in case. We had booms that were placed on the intakes there in the event that something might have come in with that surface water as well that we needed to be able to treat. We had our SCADA technicians and hydro generator techs out there, making sure that that power stayed. We had close coordination with the fire department during that entire time. And we were able to, have our people all work together in one great unison to be able to keep providing water, fantastic water to the whole community.
So was this one of the emergencies, we talked about emergency planning before, but we haven't had this Boomtown system very long. Is this just something that we hadn't got to yet, was having standby generators, or is the idea to move them around?
We have, well, in that area, I'm trying to remember if we had one there or not, but when we lost the power to the Boomtown area there, whenever they cut that out, including some other areas that were essentially from Plum Lane south, from Kitski going west in there, we had to scramble not only for that particular area, but we had to make sure that all the other areas that were affected too, that weren't directly right there in the Boomtown area, also were able to maintain their power and their water as well. So
if I can add to that,
Yeah.
essentially what that is reprioritizing where we have generators, because we're not in a position to have a generator at each one of those locations.
That's what I was really getting.
So essentially, this is working very closely with Danny and the engineers. Again, I know that sounds like a band every time I say Danny and the engineers. But really what it is they're helping to prioritize where we have those sequence pumps where if you lose this one, then you lose this one and this one. And that's what the engineering folks do when they're looking at the critical stations. And to Darren's point, one thing when I walked up, I wanted to mention, all the stuff operations did, reacting to this fire tactically, couldn't have been done without the hydro generation people, because they were the ones bringing the generators out there. I mean, we have electricians that are connecting it, but we rely on our hydro generation folks just to get us that power. So nothing that we did could have been done without them. But to Darren's point, it was a true collaboration effort because we had emergency management in the house, we had engineering involved, we had maintenance and operations, customer service, just about everyone's affected. And we're still dealing with, there's always going to be questions about now what do we do after that? That's where emergency management, and I look at Jessica and her department, that we've got ongoing discussions as to how to protect what was done up front. And Cara was sitting there too. She's over there. I've been cursing her out just because she does so much good work on upstream reservoir or upstream forest protection. I just don't like talking about it in the middle of summer. And this is what happens when you jinx it.
And speaking of CSRs, so we have customer service agents, and customer service is a huge priority for us, but we don't often get to recognize there's a couple of CSRs in the back because they have to be serving the customers at the desk, and so they don't get to come here very often. So Marcy Westlake back there trying to get out of the limelight.
Well, these are my ladies, I'm very proud of them, so.
So Tricia, Veronica, and Kim, right to left. Thank you for all you do, but I just wanted to take this opportunity. We have a lot of employees contributing a lot to this company, but they're at the front lines with the good customers, bad customers, and everybody in between.
Thank you.
Going back to the emergency response, if I could just ask a question. So talking about the generators, and I understand if it's a critical point that you would have a generator built into the facility or a part of the facility, but do we have some standby that we can pull from the fleet and put into service, and then others we have to call for rentals, or how does that work? I was just curious how that plays out.
We had a mix of it. So we did have some generators that were already stationed that were in a temporary status that were able to move, and we were able to reprioritize them out to the Boomtown area. And then in the meanwhile, we were working with local rentals, I believe it was, to be able to get our hands on some additional generators to move them to the spots where the others were before then. And then also, I know we were talking to NV Energy about the potential utilizing some other generators they may have had or had access to. So there was a lot of coordination and collaboration going on to make sure we had some kind of auxiliary power to bring in.
Was the EOC actually set up or just the incident command or what, how did you do all this coordinating?
All of this.
Just individual phone calling?
This was in the field from our on-call supervisors, and then it just spread through the company for everybody who was, as we always do, the Tumwa, answering our phone, getting out there, making sure that the situation is taken care of.
But to your point, Chair, our on-call person ended up being our primary liaison with the incident commander.
Okay.
And they were able to help prioritize where they needed access in the field.
I think it was our RUC was stood up.
That's what I
at
was-
level 2.
It was?
Yeah.
But one of the,
Washoe County, yeah.
touching on what Darren said, we have a whole new standards generators go in everywhere. But these old, the legacy systems.
And they were able to help.
We do have generators in-house that we can tow out. We have the call-in system going up, Call-in Ranch, that all has generators. Because that is in there, in the NV Energy's PSOM, that's in there. If we're gonna lose power, we're gonna lose it there more than likely than anywhere else. So we have stood up during this time frame, generators there. What happened in this instance is it didn't go and call-in system stayed in power. Mayan went out. And so we could either wait till we're able to get into a rental facility, rent generators, haul them up to Mayan. Or we called our guys out early, they grabbed them from Colin, took those to Mayan, then we got the rentals and took them back over to Colin. Because we were afraid if that happened, then there we are here,
Well, there were rolling.
we just robbed Peter to pay Paul, and so that's with the coordination, and it was just a tremendous amount of coordination between ops and hydro. I just want to echo that, the groups, they did just a phenomenal job in ensuring that, we lost two little structures, we lost a bridge and a little flume that we just rebuilt. But that's all we lost from the fire, and the guys, everybody stayed in water. We were firemen like water, so.
Sure. How big are these generators?
Pretty good size,
I mean,
450 kilowatt
And you're towing it with what?
with a dump truck. Yeah, they're not towing with your car.
this I figured, but I figured they'd be pretty darn big to run a whole system.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, amazing,
Yeah, well done.
amazing response. Awesome, good test of our systems, right? See how they're working and what you might need to do better even with a level 2 activation of EOC. I don't know that, it sounded like you internally managed it versus through the EOC, but okay. And then we're looking for final public comment. I know we've had a fair amount of people participating in the audience today, but is there any public comment online or in the audience?
If anybody online would like to speak during public comment, please raise your hand and I'll unmute you. No?
Okay, and anyone here in the room? Okay, well, not seeing any, we'll close out public comment and we'll move to any kind of board comments or requests for future agenda items. Anyone? And our next meeting would be when? September 18th. And no comments from board members, agenda item? What's that?
Just good job, Steph.
Yeah, I know, really impressive. Okay, well, with that then, we are adjourned.
Yeah.